You're listening to Oh My Health, There Is Hope podcast.
When your heart is aching and your world is shaking, don't give up. No, don't give up.
Hello and welcome to Oh My Health, There Is Hope. I'm your host, Jana Short, and today I'm here with Rabbi Dovid Cohen. Rabbi Cohen is an inspirational spiritual leader with a sensitive and pragmatic approach to help people find their way through the trials and joys of everyday life. His transformational book, We're Almost There, has received rave reviews from religious and secular critics alike. His talks and speeches bring a faith-based perspective to today's real-world problems. He is a masterful advisor to individuals and couples who tap into his wisdom, insight, and vast experience. Well, Rabbi Cohen, thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you, Jana, for having me. I'm thrilled to be here. Thank you.
I know we just talked a little bit about it before you came on the show, and I talked to you about sharing a story of hope, and I would love it so much if you did that for us now.
Absolutely. I have a few different stories of hope, but it's almost hard to choose which one to share. But I think the predominant one that came to mind when you mentioned that was the birth of my eldest child. My son, his Hebrew name is Yedidia, and in English, I guess it would be Jedediah. He's a 15-year-old young man with Down syndrome. And my wife and I got married. We were living in Jerusalem in the early years of marriage. My wife excitedly became pregnant, and the pregnancy was a normal pregnancy, and we were expecting to have a typical healthy child. We were tipped off that it was a boy, so we were extra excited about having a first child be a boy. And then that fateful day arrived, and our son was born. And a few moments, we kind of sensed in the operating room. My wife had a cesarean section. My wife, parenthetically, is actually a midwife, so she went on to a career in delivering babies herself. But at that moment in time, at that critical moment, we can sense in the room that there was a lack of excitement. Something was wrong. Something was amiss. And ultimately, just a few moments later, we discovered that our child had a debilitating disability called Down syndrome, a chromosomal disorder. And it was something that initially was incredibly deflating, incredibly upsetting, incredibly scary, but ultimately became an amazing source of hope, because as he developed and as we began to appreciate his unique strengths and his unique qualities, we began to realize the blessing that God had actually bestowed upon us, and our perspective had shifted. And we became advocates for individuals with disabilities, and we've embraced the opportunities that have come our way, and we've helped other couples who have struggled with this type of issue. Or it's really something you can extrapolate to all types of disappointment when you're expecting A and you get B. But often seeing the silver lining and being inspired and motivated by those experiences can really be life-altering and changing. So for me, that's really one story of hope that if you saw my son today, you'd understand what I'm talking about in terms of how productive he is and how he contributes to all around him and how he brings smiles to everybody's faces. And particularly in the troubling times in which we live, he really gives a lot of people a lot of hope.
I love that story, and I can very much relate to it. My uncle had Down syndrome. He lived to be 55, which is like unheard of from his generation. They didn't even call it Down syndrome. They had another word for it that's not a very pretty word. But yes, he back then they put you in a place to live, a facility. And my grandmother moved here from Holland when she was, I don't know, he was the first or her last child and the one born here in the US. So she moved here when she was older from Holland, and she just kept him at home. And he brought us so much joy. He always smiled. He never was unhappy. He worked, he went to school. Like, he lived a very productive life, which again, in that generation was kind of not the norm. So I totally am touched by your story.
I'm glad you mentioned Holland, actually, because one of the well-known essays in the special needs world and community is a poem or an essay written by a lady named Emily Pearl Kingsley, who herself was a mother of a child with a disability. It's called Welcome to Holland. And she basically talks about the shift, the attitudinal shift. You think you're going to Italy on a plane, and you arrive in Holland. And the message of her poem is basically that Holland also has beautiful things. They may not be as exotic or as exhilarating as the things that Italy has to offer, but a lot of times in life, there's something called option B. Sheryl Sandberg, the COO of Facebook, is maybe a little bit of a maligned company right now, depending on your perspective. But be that as it may, my sister-in-law actually works for Facebook. She wrote a book called Option B. She suffered a terrible tragedy in her life with the loss of her husband suddenly and unexpectedly. And I think a lot of times in life, particularly in times in which we're living, we have to pivot and we have to be flexible and we have to find option B and sometimes C and sometimes D. And that was something that I was confronted with at a young age, and something that I think if you can do it successfully and you can pivot and you can appreciate the blessings you have, that's very valuable when you're dealing with challenges.
100%. I love her plan B, because we're all right now focusing on plan Bs. I told somebody one day I had this dream and we were all on this earth and we were in a pinball machine and we were the little balls and we were getting slapped around and banged, but then we'd hit something really great and you hear that score, the numbers right up, and then you'd run back and they'd smack you again. And I'm like, it totally feels like we're living in a big pinball machine.
Amazing analogy. I never thought of that, but yes, I definitely, I was just talking to somebody before this, and they were saying that, you have to laugh at yourself when you're planning in these weeks and months that we've been living through. You can't plan anything. Things change by the day, by the week, and you just take it one day at a time. It's all you can do.
Well, one of the things we do after you share stories, we want to know how your journey, and it doesn't even have to be that journey that you shared with us. How did that prepare you to show up in life and serve the way you're serving now?
So it's a great question. And I think on some level, it has to do with maybe just watching the joy that my son brings to basic interactions. For example, like we're a family of faith, and we're observant, and we practice our Judaism, and we attend synagogue regularly. And my son has embraced that sanctuary. He loves to be there. He loves to pray to God. He loves to participate in the communal aspects of the service. And I look at him and I realize sometimes if I get down or if I get discouraged or if I have a negative attitude, I sometimes just compare myself and say, I have, on some level, you'd say I have so much more going for me, and yet he's so much happier. And it kind of prioritizes and it concretizes and kind of just focuses you and reminds you kind of what priorities are. And there's so much blessing and there's so much to be thankful for. And some people might say, well, he doesn't realize, and that's maybe why he's so happy-go-lucky. And if you really realize some of the challenges of life, maybe you won't be, you wouldn't be in such good spirits. But I think it's the opposite. I think it's just kind of simplicity and kind of just appreciating that no matter what your life is or what your lot is, there's a lot to be appreciative of and thankful for. And I don't mean to discount in any way the suffering of people. I have a private therapy practice. I work with a lot of people, and I really empathize and I hear and I listen to people suffering. And I don't mean to belittle that in any which way. At the same time, no matter what challenges you have, you're here. You woke up in the morning. There is opportunity, and there's what to be grateful and thankful for. And I use my son as that inspiration just to remind me sometimes to kind of recalibrate when I need that. We all need that at times.
And I want to talk a little bit about your book too. We're almost there. I read, I normally have the books in hand and read before you come on, and I wasn't able to do that, but it is on its way. So yay.
Oh, awesome.
But
thank you.
one of the reviews I read was readers will gain a friend, a mentor, a positive can-do attitude to life. I want to know more about this book because I think everybody can use a friend, a mentor, and a definite can-do positive attitude toward life.
So I think that's for sure. I wrote this book 5 years ago, and I'm actually working on the second part of it, which I hope to be out by the end of 2021. And there's been a little five-year hiatus between the books. But 5 years ago when I published the book, so the impetus was a little bit this feeling of frustration in my life that I had all these big plans and big ambitions and aspirations, and I kept running into roadblocks and I wasn't getting to where I wanted to go. And I came up with this construct of we're almost there, meaning a lot of times we're trying to get somewhere, we're trying to accomplish something, and things get in the way. And one has to have the patience, the perseverance, and the purpose to stay focused, to hold the vision, and to trust the process. They're processes, and sometimes the processes are much longer than we want them to be. So I wrote a book that basically was introspective and focused on my life experiences. I shared with you one anecdote, which is about raising a child with a disability, but I had a lot of other challenges in my life as well. I didn't get married in my community. People tend to get married in their early 20s. I didn't get married till I was in my early 30s. I dated hundreds and hundreds of young women trying to find a spouse. That was a very challenging dynamic and aspect of my life. And I write in the book about an amazing story with an Israeli taxi driver, how I actually ultimately met my wife in Jerusalem, which was like a miraculous story. My wife is from Vienna, Austria. I'm from New York. It was really serendipitous that we were able to connect and we were able to meet. I also had challenges in terms of my professional life, my career. I started off as an attorney, as a lawyer in major corporate America. I transitioned to the spiritual world, to being a rabbi, to being a counselor, to being a mentor and a friend, as you mentioned. And also I pursued different opportunities, different positions that didn't always work out. I kind of came in second place twice for major positions that I really had aspired to obtain. And you realize in retrospect, as you shared with me kind of a little bit offline, that things happen for a reason, things happen the way they're supposed to. And there's a plan. And often we're very thankful that things didn't work out retrospectively, but in the moment it's deflating and it's discouraging. So I really wrote a book using my own experiences and the prism and the own lens of analyzing my trials and tribulations and showing how I overcame, how I used humor to kind of appreciate, kind of to remain humble, but yet at the same time, continue to pursue, continue to grow, continue to keep moving, not to give up, and to keep my eyes on the prizes that I still hope to obtain and want to obtain, and never give up, and never give up. Just keep moving, keep pushing ahead. There's a great expression I once heard. It's called SW to the third / N. What does that mean? It's like a mathematical formula. It stands for some will, some won't, so what? Next. And that's something that I hope to include in my upcoming book, which is going to be called We're Still Here. My first book was called We're Almost There. My next book is going to be called We're Still Here. And that's really the idea, I think, of survival post-coronavirus and post the pandemic, that we're all still here, that no matter what we've been through, not everybody's still here, tragically and sadly. But the idea, if we are still here, that we're still here, that we're still going to pursue our dreams and our goals. And it may look different and maybe option B, C, or D, but we're going to keep moving forward. We're not going to give up hope, right? There is hope. That's what this podcast is all about. And that's really the idea that we have to remind ourselves that if we have a new day, and there's always new opportunities and there's always new perspectives and new approaches, we always have to be learning. We always have to be growing. I'm a big podcast junkie. I love to listen to different podcasts, and there's so much. Your podcast is amazing. There's so much great things out there. There's so much content we can glean from that we can use to motivate us. We can look at other people who are great models of success and struggle. And I think this is something that people really need to hear about, particularly in these difficult times.
Both of your books, the theme is something that when I work as a mindset coach and I'm working with people, they tell me all the time, they want their journey to have an end, right? They want to hit their health. And they come to me and say, I want to be healthy. Great. That's not a destination. That's a journey that you are always working on. There's no magic pills. So even when you get there, you still got to do the work, got to put in the work every day to stay there. And so I love that your stories are a lot like that. Like you're almost there, right? Nope, we're still here, because even as you get to that perfect place, you've got to keep moving, right? You're not like, oh, I'm here, now I can die. You just keep pushing those boundaries out and going more and more and more. So it's not like you're not achieving it. That was just a place you were passing by. So I love that you're sharing that in your books.
If I could just share something, there's a Kabbalistic, in the deepest esoteric parts of Jewish thought, there's a Kabbalistic idea that a person is always trying to attain a certain goal, but yet at the same time, they always have to have like a bigger goal that's off in the distance. They're not focused on it right now, but there always has to be something even bigger than what you're focused on. And then when you finally conquer kind of this thing you've been working on, then you move that aside and you have the new thing slide in there. And then you have a bigger goal, meaning like you're saying, all of life is continuously growing, going for the next milestone, never to be satisfied, never to just sit back and be, I'm done. Until you're done, you're not done. And that's an important level. As long as the light is still, as long as there's still light, as long as you're here, there's still what to accomplish.
Exactly. So if you get it out of your mind that you have to hit a destination, because you will just keep moving, right? Then you never failed, right? You never failed hitting that destination. You passed it by in one way or another. Sometimes we hit it straight on. Sometimes we get snuck around. Sometimes we have to tunnel under it, but we always hit those. We keep moving forward. So I know that when I'm working with a lot of people who, especially right now, they're losing hope. There's a lot of mental health issues going on, and they're depressed, and families are blowing up because they're spending all that time we wish we had with our families. We're now getting in massive doses, and they're falling apart. They're wondering, what can they do? Like, how do I get through this? How do I survive that? And I'm like, if you're breathing, I'm telling you, you can survive anything. Just keep moving.
Right. No, it's true. You reminded me of something that I don't share this so often. It's kind of a little bit of an intimate thought, but I mentioned earlier some of positions that maybe I didn't obtain that I had hoped to obtain. And the truth is, sometimes I'd have anxiety about getting the positions, in the sense that, like, I was so young and I'd get this great position, and then, like, I'd have what would I have to move, what would I have to look forward to? So in the sense that there's something about everything in the right time. And you get what you need at the right time, and timing is very important. And in terms of your point, in terms of people struggling, so I've had the opportunity to be invited on a number of podcasts, and I've reiterated this point, that I found, at least in my work with couples in particular, that marriages that were on very solid footing pre-corona tended, generally speaking, to really excel in this more intensive time with our spouses. Situations where couples maybe were a little bit on shakier footing leading into the pandemic, sadly, in many of those instances, when you put them to the pressure cooker, so then that unfortunately can unravel. So, even in terms of our relationships and our interplay with others, it's process. There's process. There's the question of kind of, it's not just like a momentary thing in terms of our relationships and our interplay with our loved ones. It's kind of the long game, and kind of what do we invest in those relationships leading into this situation that we're in. And if we've been fortunate to make it through, how are we going to reorient in the new world that we're going to be entering into? And how are we going to reprioritize some of the things that maybe we neglected pre-pandemic? And these are things that I hope to, elucidate a bit more as I write my second book.
I know in relationships for women, because I can't really speak for the men or how they think or how they process, but I know for us, we're always fixers, right? We're nurturers. We want to, especially when you marry someone, you see all those red flags, you're like, well, I can fix them. Just enough love, the right things, I can fix that. And it took me years on this journey to realize you can't fix anybody. That's their journey. And so when I'm in my second marriage, and we've been married 20 years. But I remember every time I thought something was broken him, I worked on something that was broken me. And as I'm fixing things in me, it fixed those things. Like, for every action, there's a reaction. And so as I'm fixing myself, which is the only thing I have control over fixing, everything around me just started to get fixed. I wish I had known this when I was younger.
No, sure. Look, it's much easier always to blame the other and say the reason why I'm doing this is because you're doing that. But you said exactly right. You hit the nail on the head. At the end of the day, we only control ourselves, and even within our own kind of sphere of influence, even there we lack a lot of control. But to the degree that we have any control, it's over our own behaviors, our own attitudes. Somebody once asked me, how do I have someone who was single asked me kind of, how do I ensure a healthy or successful marriage? Say, work on refining yourself, on your character. The healthier you are when you come into a union with somebody else, the better the odds are that that relationship will work out. Like, sadly, the statistics show across the United States that the divorce rate is incredibly high. It's something that, probably upwards of 50%, if not more, couples that get married get divorced. I'm not quoting any particular study right now, but I'm familiar with the numbers, and I think this is certainly an accurate number across all, denominations and, members of people that live in our country. And it goes to, you can speak a lot about it, different explanations of it. Certainly, a healthy, successful relationship requires a tremendous amount of energy, commitment, self-sacrifice, but to make sure that we're doing our parts, that's really what we can do. 100%, everybody's putting in 100%. That is something that I think, sadly, a lot of people don't appreciate or realize, and they look at marriage as kind of like that other person's going to fix all of my emptiness or my needs, And then when they don't do that for them, which is an impossible thing to do, they're disappointed and they want to find a new partner and someone else. And look, we live in the Amazon world where you basically touch a button, you can get on with almost anything you want. And it definitely has a trickle down effect into other areas of life as well.
That's so funny because I'm visualizing looking on Amazon for a new husband, right?
I was thinking the same thing.
And it gets delivered in 24 hours.
I should speak to Jeff Bezos. Maybe we could work out some sort of lucrative type of dating platform. But, that is a may. Yeah, it's. But there, yeah, look, we're affected by the technological advances that we have. I've spoken a lot, and I love to speak about communication in marriage, in particular, communication in general with staff, with employees, but communication with children, communication with a spouse. So the new media makes it difficult. It often impacts the way we communicate. If we're so used to all day long kind of posting and tweeting and not really articulating ourselves properly or texting, we lose kind of that, we lose the intimacy, we lose the ability to connect in meaningful ways. And we always have to be conscious and sensitive to the things that are going on around us and how they're affecting our most important dynamics and relationships.
That is really great advice, especially for younger couples, because I grew up and there wasn't social media. I still keep thinking the old filing system is coming back and I'm going to need a lot of paper and pen, but it's not coming back. And I think that for sure the younger people are having a different type of communicating issue. And I know as a woman, when I communicate to my husband, I respond quickly. Like my thought process goes right to my mouth and out it goes. And then I release it literally verbally out of my mouth and I'm done. And then a week later, he's still hurt. And I'm like, what are you talking about? I don't remember that, because when I've expressed how I felt, I leave it and walk away. But some people and a lot of guys take that in eternally and they don't, because I don't want to hurt her feelings. I don't want to say anything back. I don't want to reply. And it's worked for us for 20 years now. And it's as I get older, I don't need to express myself. Some things are just not, I don't need to express, when you're first married, you have to tell them everything. Now it's not so much, but we definitely have to learn how to communicate better. And it's super hard, like tweeting your husband, hey, when are you going to get home? Instead of making a conversation with him, it's weird. I know couples who communicate from room to room in their house by phone. They text them, what's for dinner? I don't know. What do you feel like?
No, it really is a number of important points you make. One is that showing respect, proper deference to our significant other means like not calling out to them from upstairs to downstairs, but taking the time to go downstairs to see them face to face. I'm guilty of this just like the next person. I'm not preaching here. I just notice myself sometimes that like, why do we fall into these bad habits of just texting when we're in the same house or talking from upstairs or downstairs, so on and so forth. The other point though, I think you alluded to at the beginning of relationships, people have different expectations. Time is important, meaning that we have to kind of, people make marriage vows and, till death do we part. But we need to take these things seriously. Like if we see this commitment as something that is meant to last a lifetime, then we realize that life is long and that we don't have to accomplish everything in the first 6 months or in the first year. And I've seen in my own experience, I'm married now almost 17 years, relationships deepen and you see your spouse differently over time and you build credibility with your spouse and they build credibility with you. And there are deposits that are made and you can make withdrawals. And I'm just quoting from different marriage books, but it's a process. And I think a lot of marriages break up way too quickly because they're not willing to put in the time or the requisite investment to be able to capitalize on building that comfort level with each other and understanding the nuances or the anomalous situations that always tend to arise in relationships.
Well, since we've been talking about relationships, I want to talk about future relationships with you. I want to know what your thought process is on the impact that having a pandemic literally sitting on us for a year. I'm wondering what that next generation's communication is going to look like, because we're telling our kids, wear a mask, don't touch, wash your hands, no hugging, no one can come in our house. It's just weird. It's not our natural, we're a community of people who want to connect constantly. And now the younger generation is seeing the mask. I can't go see grandma. I can't touch, it's just completely different. And I'm wondering, are we raising a bunch of kids that are going to be germaphobes or have issues touching and hugging and, communicating? Because it's definitely different. And it's been a year. It's not just a few weeks.
Jana, that's a great question. That's a really powerful question. I'm just laughing because my 4-year-old, he calls his mask his mascus. He's like wearing it's like Damascus. like I'm wearing my mascus. It's very cute. So there are a lot of sweet and nice stories also. But yes, I mean, there's no question that there is untold damage going on to the next generation. It's tragic. It's sad. I mean, here on the East Coast, there's been a lot of controversy, particularly I've seen just within my kind of insular community, a lot of controversy in terms of schools being open, being closed, restrictions, to what degree, how high is the risk really for that demographic versus the cost of having them out of school, having them with all these restrictions, so on and so forth. And I think the damage is really, yet to be told. I mean, it's hard to project, or I know you asked me to, but it's hard to really see kind of what the ramifications are. I think giving children a safe and secure vibe is certainly, I learned that word from my teenage daughter, if you're vibing it. But there's a vibe that I think kids have to have a vibe that their parents love them, that we're there for them, that we understand the challenging time that we're in. We have to kind of remind them this is not normal, that hopefully sooner rather than later with vaccines, so on and so forth, that we will get closer to a new normal, sooner rather than later. You can see the light at the end of the tunnel, I think. Look, 2021 is still going to be a very complicated year, I would argue, but I hope by 2022 for sure, we've really cleared this as a societal issue. And who's to say that, I don't want to be a naysayer, but who's to say there won't be another pandemic, so on and so forth. So look, I think we all have to take stock. I think we have to be aware that I think, kids need to be kids, and they need to be able to enjoy life and have fun and interact. And I think the touch point is like the inability for so long for grandparents not to have touch with their grandchildren. Yeah, there are untold levels of damage and harm on both sides. It's a lose-lose situation, right? You have to protect the vulnerable at what cost? In people's businesses and there's costs on both sides. Obviously, life is the highest level of thing that has to take priority. But at the same time, to ignore the costs that are being paid to save people's lives is being oblivious to the challenging times in which we live.
I believe that most of our limiting beliefs that are set into our beautiful little minds come at a very young age. So I always am cautioning parents, be careful how you discuss things in front of your kids, because you may not even be directing it to them. But if they're hearing you talk about your fears, all of a sudden illness becomes a fear to them, because that is now a limiting belief to them. And they see it as a child. It's not till later as an adult that limiting belief is still in their head, and they act as an adult in fear of issues, right? So I'm always like, be sure that those discussions are outside of the kids. You always keep it up. Let them know that that's, it's temporary. It's going to pass. This is part of, our journey, and we're going to learn something really amazing from it. I just don't know what yet.
It helps if you know a foreign language, like if you can speak to your spouse in a foreign language. But the truth is, I once heard a beautiful idea from a scholar, and that is that children are like immigrants. What does that mean? They're like immigrants, meaning when you're an immigrant to a new society, a new country, you imitate the locals, right? You imitate the natives. And similarly, children are like immigrants in the sense that they imitate their parents. So if they see us filled with anxiety or stress or worry or concern, they're also going to, and they may not express it in the same ways. But yeah, we have to be, I see that as my children are getting older, I see they're always kind of like listening in and kind of what are daddy and mommy talking about, and particularly when it's issues of finances or money, they always perk up. They want to know like kind of what things cost and what's going on. But we have to be aware that we're always modeling for our children, always. There's never a time when we're not.
Well, Rabbi Cohen, it has been amazing having you on the show. Can you tell everyone where they can find your book and locate you?
Absolutely. Thank you so much. So my website is a great way to communicate with me. It's Rabbi Dovid, not David, but Dovid. My English name is David. My Hebrew name is Dovid, D-O. My website is rabbidovidmcohen.com. There are links to all my book and to all different array of things that I do. My own podcast as well about philanthropy, a lot of different ways to connect with me. That's a great way, in fact, to connect with me. My book is actually on sale right now on Amazon. It's like for $4.99, you can get a lot of copies of the book on Amazon. So it's really easy. You can just go and get the book there, or you can get it through my website. And I hope you'll stay tuned as I hopefully produce the second continuation of book number 1. And I hope to be able to share book number 2 with the world, hopefully by the end of this year.
Well, I hope when you release your second book that you come on here and talk to us about it, because we'd love to hear about it.
That would be awesome. I'd welcome that opportunity. Thank you so much.
All of your connections are going to be in the show notes. So when people are listening, they're going to be able to just go click right to you. So you'll be easy to find. Thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you for your time. It was really nice speaking with you.
Thanks for listening to the Oh My Health, There Is Hope podcast. Make sure to visit Jana's website, bestholisticlife.com, where you can subscribe to the show on iTunes, Google Play, or listen there, so you'll never miss an episode. While you're at it, if you found value in the show, we'd appreciate a rating on iTunes, or if you simply tell a friend about the show. That'll help too. Let's change the world together, one health expert at a time. Looking forward to seeing you next time.